But we're right now just setting up our color layout. All right, so using this blue, I just want small amounts of the dark blues to come in. So roll these snakes fairly thin. I know it looks like it's not even going to make any difference, but when we start kneading these colors together and folding them over, we will get a beautiful marbled effect. If you find you're sliding over your baseboard or over your cutter or your mat, more than actually rolling, just add a bit of your shortening. It'll help it stick to the board. So randomly add in some of those blues. I don't want too much of the deep blue, so I'm just going to do one more small one. I'm going to use some of this lighter blue. Again, I don't want lots of this. Just enough to pull in some color. And randomly placing them within my other snakes. All right. Now we have a bit more we're going to do to this tier once we get the marbling on there and go to finish off the overall cake. But for right now, we're going to do a beautiful marble, and then we'll take care of the rest of that later. So what you want to do now is flatten these really big ones out. Everything should be around the same plane. So we want everything to be about the same. Flatten them out, and then just bring them all together. And then pick them up, bring them closer to you so you can work with them. Now, our objective is not to knead these all together. That's the last thing we want to do. We just worked so hard to give ourselves some variation in color, so we want to keep that. So working over itself and in the same direction as our snakes. Fold it over itself in the same direction. If you do get lines like that, that's okay, but if you want to straighten them out, you can. But always working in the same line direction. And now take all of your snakes and create one large snake. And as I roll this around, you can see the different grays and blues in variation. But again, always working towards the line, never against it, and don't ever fold it over because you will get too many different striations. If I were to drape this cake, I would potentially do it that way. But I'm paneling the cake, so I want all of my lines to go around the cake. That's why I'm keeping everything straight lines. Again, just going to keep rolling or kneading, in the linear direction that we had everything rolled. And as we push, you'll see that these colors start blending beautifully together and marbling together, but we're still staying in that one direction. I do not want to change that line. So you can fold it over as many times as you want. Keep in mind that the more you knead this, so I can also fold in this way because my lines will still stay, but the more that you work this, the more blended you will become. So you want to watch that. And as I roll it out, it will blend a little bit more. So when you're happy with what it looks like on the outside, start to roll it. And if you need to fix any more blending, you can do that as you're rolling. But I'm happy with this variation in color. I don't want to knead it in too much because I'm just going to end up with a blue tier at that point. So taking your cornstarch, just dust up your cake. Can you give that a quick measure? So we do need to measure around our cake and the height of our cake to ensure that we do wrap completely around. In order to cover the cake and get a full wrap around, we do need to measure the circumference of an 8-inch, which is 25 inches. So it will be the same for every round 8-inch cake that you make. So if you wanted to print out a little chart of all of these cakes, you won't have to measure each and every time that you make one. However, it takes all of 5 seconds to do it each time, so it's not a big deal. If you're not happy with the blending on this side, flip it over and check it. Look at this beautiful marbling.
I like that one.
So I like this side. I am going to flip it over and use this side instead because you get a really nice blue and the nice gray marbling right in here.
It's a lot more distinctive.
This is beautiful on this side. This I would use maybe for a sky type cake. This side I love for the effect that we're trying to achieve with the marbling. And it's really going to look great when we go in later near the end and highlight those lines with some bronze coloring.
Shiny things.
Her favorite shiny things. Can we get a little bit more cornstarch, please? Yeah. So if you find you're sticking to your board, just come in with some cornstarch. It'll help you roll it out. Now before I roll this too thin, I do want to take a piece off, probably this end because I'm still a little bit thick. I'm not going to need it, and I'm just going to set it aside because I'm going to roll that out a little bit more to be able to do my top. But for right now, just going to lay it aside. And I'm going to roll this to 25 inches. And making sure I keep a good width the whole way across as well. I believe it's 4 inches tall, so I need to make sure I keep at least 4 inches that way.
We are 4 3/4.
4 3/4? Perfect, I got plenty rolled. However, you can tell here now that I rolled it a little bit thinner, these blended a lot better. You can see a beautiful dark gray in between these two blues here. So as I roll more and more, they blend more and more. So as I mentioned when we started, you really don't need those colors together a whole lot because you will overmix them and you'll end up more of this if you mix too much. This is plenty long enough. Rolled it to about 1/4 inch. And now I'm going to create a straight edge. I only need one straight edge, which will then become the top of my cake. Just going to cut one off. I know I have lots of room to play with here, so I'm not concerned about cutting it too shallow. But if, for your own peace of mind, you'd like to take your ruler, or your measuring tape rather, and just check for measure, I'm at about 7.5 inches on that side, so for ease of use, I am going to cut off a little bit more across the top. And again, you can just put that back to reuse it. Obviously, we can't reuse it as ivory, but if you need that all together, it'll give you a nice blue color. And you can use it for something else. I'm going to straighten off this side again. And I'm just going to set this aside for a second. I want this to just not crust over or get hard. I just want it to set a little bit so it doesn't pick up any fingerprints when I go to move it to place it around the cake. So just pick it up ever so gently because you created a nice line on one side. Just lay it up to the top of your table. Take that piece that we cut off earlier, and we need to roll this to about 8-inch round. Again, look at the beautiful marbling. If you're not happy with that side, again, we already know what this side looks like. It's far too blue for me, so I am going to use the marble side. Check it against your cake. If this was a real cake, just use an 8-inch wooden board, cardboard, and just make sure that you have enough. I have more than enough, so let's cut off some of the excess for now. And then what we want to do, so this is nice and sticky. We want to take this piece of fondant. You can play with where you want this marble to land at this point. So I would like to keep more of this and less of that. So I'm going to lay it off to that side. Taking your smoother, give that, if it's too sticky, give it a little dust of cornstarch. Give it a little rub until it's nice and smooth, nice and flat. Before I flip this, I am going to dust my board as well because it's going to stick otherwise. Flip it over. I like to use a straight edge because I can, whether it be a paring knife, a box cutter, reason being if I were to use the pizza cutter to do this, I can't get perfectly flat in against my cake. I actually have to go on an angle to cut it. With this, I can set the blade directly against the cake, and I can use that as my guide to cut off my excess. So just cut that off all the way around. Don't cut into your cake or styrofoam like that. Just cut it all off. You can do that on top of a turntable so you can turn it as you do it. That would help as well. Make sure you're not stuck to your table.
It's pretty.
It is great. Look at that. All right, and let's just add some water. Can you just add some water to that for me right around the edge? So Kara's just going to have water, put some water on the edge there. So when we add this panel to the sides, we're going to adhere properly to that top edge. While she does that, I'm going to take this panel that we made, and I'm going to roll it against a mini rolling pin. I could roll it on itself if I wanted, but a rolling pin just helps you use it as a guide while you're putting it around, or a small piece of PVC would work perfectly here. Now, as I'm rolling this, I want to make sure I keep this bottom edge that I created all lined up as I roll it together. If you're afraid of it sticking to itself, if you're in a very humid climate, you could absolutely add a bit of cornstarch to it. We're not going to be leaving it like this for very long, so I'm not too concerned. And if I were to leave it wrapped around itself for too long, the weight of itself would actually start to squish together, and I'd have to start over. Now, once I get here, I am going to just trim off that excess to give me a straight line to work with. Some people do panel with it up this way, wrap your panel around, and they'll use the top edge of their cake as a guide to cut it. I don't like doing it that way. It does end up with jagged sides. You may also dig into this beautiful top that you made, and then you have to try and fix it. I do this with real cakes all the time. Flip them upside down and work upside down. Then you are creating the perfect 90-degree angle because your board is flat against the table. Your bottom edge of this is against the table, and you are giving it no choice but to be 90 degrees. Take your panel, and because this had a line in the back, I'm going to use that as my back part of my cake. I'm just going to wrap this panel all the way around. Now, I had some extreme overlap here, but I'm very happy with what I have. So over this side now, the reason you want somewhat of an overlap is so that when you cut it, you're cutting through both pieces of fondant so that you get the perfect straight line. So go right into your cake and come right up and cut it off. So this piece again is extra. Gently peel this back to peel off the inside piece, and we'll get the perfect seam here. But before we do that, we need to add a little bit of water to that seam on one side. Now, it does look like my overlap wasn't quite right, so I am going to just trim that one more time so that, again, my lines line up perfectly. Take off the piece in the back, and now I'll have the perfect edge. Take your smoother. The first thing I like to do is attach and make sure the seal around my top edge, because that is my top, guys. I know it's upside down, or remember this is upside down. So this is my top edge. So seal that top round to your panel by just running your smoother along the bottom. Get that nice and adhered. Then flip it up the other way and make sure you're nice and adhered to your cake. Take your straight edge or your knife, just using the bottom of your cake as a guide, go around and trim off that little bit of excess so you now have the perfect bottom to your cake as well as the perfect top. And there we go. Thank you. Now if you want one more time, just go around, make sure everything's attached.
Wait for the magic. Wait for the magic.
And let's give this a turn. And look at that. The perfect 90-degree angled cake with razor sharp edges, fail proof each and every time, no matter what you do.